Alright guys, how we doing? This week what I'm going to be looking at is, well, basically I've been a little bit worried that maybe I've been leaving some people behind, that I've been jumping a bit too far ahead with all the kind of, advanced like GML coding kind of stuff. And like if you were following along just using the drag and drop options, you probably got left behind somewhere in the top-down shooter tutorials. So I'm gonna go back and just basically explain how to recreate the platformer from my in-depth platformer tutorial, or how to recreate something mostly similar, mostly the same sort of thing, just using the drag and drop commands in case you're not really ready to get straight into the code yet, and or you're just you're trying to bake up some quick prototypes and stuff for your game, and you're not looking to create anything that's super complex or polished or whatever right away, which is perfectly fine. So I'm gonna just be taking a look at how we can still use all the drag and drop options. Use some of the ones we haven't used yet and that kind of thing, and you can start to see how you can build things like a platformer with it. So as you can see over here, we've got the setup that basically what I started with for my in-depth platformer tutorial, which once you're more comfortable with the code, and or once you're prepared to step into coding, you can go watch that and see how you can take direct control over these sorts of things. But yeah, we basically just have the same setup that we have in that tutorial. We have a sprite for our player, a sprite for the walls, and an object for the wall, and an object for the player with the sprite setup as shown. And I've just sort of scattered that around. None of these have any code in them yet whatsoever. They're totally blank. So I mean, if we were to run the game right now, all that's going to happen is nothing, right? So these just sit here and nothing's going on. So one thing we're going to want to do is, because we want to use these walls, we're going to tick this box over here called solid, which basically turns on some sort of automatic kind of like collision system within GameMaker, and it tells the game that this object is a solid wall, and we'll be using that in a little bit. So the very first thing we want to do is make it so our player actually falls and that there's some gravity in the scene. So what we're going to do is, now what we would normally do, I suppose what a lot of people would do is, and there are valid ways of making this work, is do something like go to create and use set the gravity. To set up a gravity, you would specify the direction of down as being like 270 for down, and give yourself a gravity that way. I don't like using this gravity. The reason why I don't like using gravity like this is because gravity, the built-in version in GameMaker, it operates by applying a vertical speed to your character every single frame, and it does that after your step event, which I don't really like. The reason I don't like that is because you can do all your speed calculations in your step event and do your collisions and work them out all properly, but you have to, basically every time you land on a surface, you need to turn this gravity back off. Whereas I prefer to have my gravity system on all the time, and as it is in reality, and and never actually need to turn it off. Because if you don't turn it off, you do all your speed calculations and stuff, and you say, right, collide with this wall and stop moving, and you stop yourself moving, you set your vertical speed to 0, but then your gravity is applied after your step event, so you start to fall into the floor. So if you've ever tried to just mess around with the actions and stuff and set up gravity and build collisions in what would seem an intuitive way, and you notice your player always just constantly falls really slowly through the floor, then now you know why. It's because gravity is applied after after the step event, which I don't like. We can create an equivalent of gravity super easily without using the create event. All we need to do is create, in the step event, use this action over here, which is set the vertical speed, and if we set that to relative, it'll just add this vertical speed onto our current vertical speed every single frame. In other words, it'll do exactly what gravity does. So if we just set vertical speed, I don't know, 0. 0.6 or 0.06. Yeah, that'll do. That will, apply vertically every single frame. If I run the game now, you'll see, falling and falling faster and faster and so on. Maybe turn that up, it's a bit slow. 0.6, we'll try that. Maybe might be a bit fast. Well, it's fast, but you get the point. Yeah, so basically that, set the vertical speed, relative, and a small number in here does the exact same thing as setting the gravity, only it happens exactly when you tell it to. And it doesn't happen like after your step event and stuff like that. So without actually coding that, that gives you a little bit more control over, when your gravity happens. Just so when you're creating your game logic, you don't have to turn your gravity off. You can just set your vertical speed to be 0 when you're on, a floor or something. It just makes things like that a little bit easier. Alright, so now that we have some gravity for our player, the next thing we want to do is make it so he actually lands on the floor. In order to do that, we're basically going to check every single frame to see if just below us, well no, actually sorry, we're going to check to see if the place we're going to be next frame vertically, if there is a collision there. So if we were moving up, we would check basically a little bit above us, and if we were moving down, we check a little bit below us to see if we're about to have a collision. And I explained this in my in-depth platformer tutorial, how you want to handle collision logic generally, or how I most prefer to handle it. You don't have to handle it this way, it might not be the best way, I don't know everything, but the way I prefer to handle collisions logically in my head is to say, if I am about to collide with something, move as close as possible to that thing, but stop just before I would collide with it and set my speed to be 0. How a lot of collision systems might work is to say, if I'm currently colliding, so I'm already overlapping the object, push me back out, and I don't like that. I don't like to create a system that sort of bounces you out of an object when you've already collided with it. I prefer to stop the collision from ever technically happening in the first place by saying, if I am about to collide with this object, then move as close as possible to it, so land on it, and then set my speed to 0. So that's what we're going to do. Over here in actions, as soon as I can find it, this one over here in control, a little arrow pointing towards a little white line sideways, not to be confused with a different one that we'll use in a minute, which is an arrow pointing downwards to a little white line. So the arrow pointing to the right towards this little white line, drag that over here, and this is our check collision action. So what this does is what I just said. It's going to check a given set of coordinates to see if there would be a collision with our object. If our object was at these coordinates, would it collide? So we're going to say x and y to be 0 and v speed. So what that means is it's going to check on tick relative at the bottom here, so these are related to our current x y coordinates. So what that means is it's going to check x relative 0, so exactly horizontally on the screen, exactly where our object currently is, so whatever my object's x coordinate is, and whatever our y coordinate is, up and down on the screen, in plus whatever our vertical speed is, which is represented by v speed. You'll know if you've seen me doing code and stuff now, you'll realize from this that you can use the built-in variables in the actions like this. But if you type v-speed into here, what that does is it'll pull your object's vertical speed out, and it'll basically ask the game for your current vertical speed, which we already set with our gravity and stuff, is what we're adding to. That's how we get that number. So if we were falling at, say, 4 pixels a frame, what this will do is it'll check our position, and 4 pixels down from that position, it's going to check there to see if there would be a collision. Objects tick only solid, so it's only going to check for things like our wall, which are set to solid, and then hit OK. Now you'll see these little sort of circular actions like this, which are questions, and So they're asking the game a question. They're checking to see if something is true. Basically, if that collision is true, then it's going to carry out whatever the next action is in here. So if I were to do something like create an instant, I mean, there's no reason why we would do this, but like if, for example, like we check if there's a collision, then create a wall somewhere. This is just to make an example, we don't obviously want this piece of code, is that it'll say if there's a collision there, then do this, and then if we have more actions underneath, it's not going to say if there's a collision there, do this and this. It's just going to say if there's a collision there, do this. Then, regardless, do this. So it will only do the next action by itself. If we want the question, if it happens to be true, so if there is a collision here, if we want to do multiple actions, which we do, we need to go into control and use these arrows over here, which create a start of a block and an end of a block, and these allow you to group actions into one, block. So if we start to put our actions inside just by dragging and dropping, it'll say if there is a collision at position and start of a block, and then it'll do everything until it sees the end of a block, if that happens to be true. And if it's not true, it'll skip this block and it'll do or whatever happens to be underneath it. So remember, if you're asking a question, if you're doing a question, so like a circular drag and drop action icon, then if that question is true, it returns true, or if there is a collision, or if there is a certain number of instances, or you have pressed a button, and so on and so forth, it will it will do whatever the next line is, unless you use blocks, in which case it'll do everything inside the block that follows it. So now that we know whether or not there's a collision, obviously we don't want to create a wall, that was just an example. What we want to do is, as I said, move as close as possible to the wall that we would collide with. Now there's actually a drag and drop option built specifically for this. If you go to move, over here, the little downward arrow, I mentioned it earlier, pointing towards a white line, that's the one we need now. You drag that into your block, and it's called move to contact, which means it's going to move your object as close as possible without to the object without actually colliding with it. Well, it's going to move it in a given direction. Yes, it's going to move. Sorry, let me start again. It's going to move your object in the direction that you set here until it collides with an object. So basically, we're going to say move to contact in direction. What that means is it's going to move us in the direction that we're currently facing. So, so if we're moving like a little bit diagonal and stuff or whatever, basically, if it's we're just going to move in whatever direction we're currently moving, which is appropriate since we checked if vertically we're going to hit something. We're going to set the maximum just to be 5 because there are some little bugs and quirks with this system. If you have maximum of -1 would basically mean that there is no maximum and it'll move you as close as it needs to. But there are a few little quirks and bugs because we're using direction of direction, and sometimes if you like walk off of a corner it can like seemingly teleport you to another wall. So just to sort of ward against that. Again, this is sort of just a little prototype engine for you, really. It does have a few little quirks and things about it. But if we set maximum to 5, it should, more or less get rid of those little kinks. And then against solid objects, as we said, so it knows to find our object wall. And it'll basically move us a maximum of 5. Basically just put whatever your current, your maximum speed happens to be. We don't actually have one set with our vertical speed. Technically, our gravity can go on forever, but typically you would set something up to limit your speed so you don't fall ridiculously fast ever, and then your maximum would appropriately be whatever that happens to be. So, move to contact in direction. Then the next thing we need to do, once we've moved as close as possible to the wall vertically, or the ceiling, is to basically reduce our vertical speed to 0 because we've hit the wall. So basically we just use this big white down arrow again, which is setting our vertical speed. We don't need to take relative this time, and just have 0, so it'll just set our vertical speed to absolute 0. And now, hopefully, if I run the game, you can see, boom, we land on the floor. It was a bit quick, but hopefully you can see that. He just landed, boom, on the floor because he moved faster and faster and faster, and then he saw he was about to hit the floor. He moved as close as possible to the floor. He's on it, pixel perfect, look, land, and then his speed has been set to 0. So now he lands on the floor. That's fantastic. The next thing we want to do is basically set it up so that he can collide horizontally as well as vertically. Basically, we just do exactly the same thing we've already done. So, but we use h speed and stuff and horizontal speed to do our checks. So again, if we go down to control and we do check collision, and we're going to say applies to self, and we're going to just say x h speed, y0 relative objects only solid. All the same reasons as before, but instead of we're checking exactly where we are vertically, and we're checking exactly where we are plus our current movement speed, either right or left, so it'll be like -4 if we're going left, or +3 if we're going right, you know, and it's going to add that number and it's going to check that position, the position we're about to be in next frame, to see if there's a collision horizontally. Have I got those in the right order? Yes, I have. I'm putting this one above the vertical check. There's a reason for that. The reason you want to check horizontal speed first in terms of like your logic order, as opposed to vertical speed, is just for the odd case where, like, say you hit a perfect diagonal, you want to say, if you were falling towards a platform and like you were about to move into it perfectly diagonally, you basically have to make a decision in your game about whether or not that means you land on the platform, or whether or not that counts as hitting the wall and falling. And obviously it feels a little bit better to play if you say you land on the platform, which means you want to check your horizontal collision first, because it's going to see, oh, there's nothing in front of me, move me horizontally, and then check below you and say, oh, there's a floor below me, land. As opposed to if you do vertical first, because it would say, oh, there's nothing below me, move vertically, oh, there's now a wall in front of me, don't move horizontally, and you would miss the platform. So that's the only reason why I'm going to do horizontal in front of vertical. So now we've got the second collision check set up. What we want to do is just create another start block and another end block right there, just so that we can create some actions for what happens if we're about to collide horizontally. And then again, we just do the same thing. We go to move, and we say move to contact, direction, maximum of 5, and against solid objects. Okay. And then we want to set our horizontal speed to be 0. Simple as that. And now it'll be, hang on, move that to there. There we go. The thing we want to do now, of course, is set up so we can actually move, because at the moment we can't actually move left and right, so there'd be no way to actually demonstrate that this horizontal speed is even working. So in order to set that up, I'm going to come over here and add an event for the keyboard for whenever the left arrow key is pressed. Now, when the left arrow key is pressed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set our horizontal speed to be minus 0.5. And we're going to say that that's relative, so it's going to constantly add negative 0.5 to our horizontal speed whenever we're holding left. So at the moment we can speed up to infinity. Obviously not what we want. So I'm going to give ourselves a maximum speed. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to control, no I'm not, yes I am, and grab this question mark over here. And it's going to say, if an expression is true. Now this is quite a powerful action that allows you to check like any like variable in the game or whatever to see or check like any like mathematical function. If you've ever used like Excel and you've done sort of like an if statement or something in Excel to see like if like B22 is bigger than E29, then colour this cell green or whatever. It's that same sort of concept. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if h speed, which is our horizontal speed, is greater than -5. So if our horizontal speed is bigger than -5, which means like it could be -4, or it could be 0, or it could be like 3 if you're moving to the right, or whatever. And then because we've got that, and as I explained to you with the circular icon over here, how this works is it's going to say, if that's true, then do this thing. And if it's not true, it won't do this thing. If we wanted it to do multiple things, again, we would use like a start block and an end block and put a bunch of actions in, but we don't. We just wanted to do this one thing. So, you know, that should be perfectly fine now. And hopefully, if I run the game, we should demonstrate, like, I've landed on here, and I can move to the left and collide with that wall. So yeah, we're getting there. We've got gravity, and we can move to the left, and we can land on platforms. We're almost there. So what we want now is just, I'm going to copy what I've just done, and basically just do the same thing for moving right. So I'm going to test an expression again and say if our h speed this time is less than 5, because 5 horizontal speed would be us moving to the right at 5 pixels a frame or whatever. So if our horizontal speed is less than 5, then, and the reason I'm doing this expression is, testing this expression, is to set a maximum speed. So when we're moving to the left, we can't go more to the left than -5 pixels a frame. And when we're going to the right, we can't go more to the right than 5 pixels a frame, because it has to be less than 5. So then we're going to go to move, set the horizontal speed, and we're going to set that to 0.5 relative if we press right. Same as what we did for left, only it's positive instead of negative. Now we can move left and right. Fantastic. And you'll notice you slowly speed up as well, like that. At the moment you slide infinitely if you let go of the button. So what we're going to do is go add event, create, and we're going to add, and you'll be familiar with this if you've seen any of the coding stuff, is we're going to use set friction, which just sets up a value that will reduce our speed every single frame. And we're just going to set that to be something really small, like 0.02, and then hopefully when we move left and right, okay, we could do with turning that up a bit, maybe 0.2. There we go. So now when we move left and right, we slowly kind of slide to a hole. It's very, very slidey at the moment, a bit of a kind of a Mario feel, but you can play about with those numbers to get a feeling exactly kind of how you want. So yeah, so now we're setting our friction. What we want to do now is be able to actually jump so we can climb around this platform level. So what I'm going to do is go over here and add an event. This time I'm going to use a key press event instead of just a key event, and say shift, just so that when we're, we don't jump by holding shift, we jump by pressing shift. So I'm going to use press shift, so it only detects it once when we first press it, and it'll only carry these things out again if we let go of the button and press it again. Now what we're going to do is just set our vertical speed to be I don't know, -8, for example. It's minus because we're going up. If it was positive, it means we're going down. But we're just going to set that to be like -8. So if I set us now and I press shift, you'll see we're able to jump. That's pretty cool. But at the moment, there's nothing from stopping us mashing shift and just jumping, forever and jumping in the air. So we need to say that we can only jump when we're on the ground. And the way to check if we're not on the ground is to basically use a collision check like we've been doing in here. And we're going to go to control and say in questions, drag this check collision action in, and we're going to check x, we're going to say relative again. So at the moment this being 0 means it's checking exactly where we are. But we want to check just below us. I'm going to check 1 pixel below us. Y1, exactly 1 pixel below where we currently are, to see if there is a solid wall. only solid. So if there is, we should be allowed to jump, and if there isn't, then we won't be able to jump. So now if I run the game, press shift, you can hear me mashing it there, but you know, I'm not floating off into the sky. So there you go, there's a functional system for making, you know, a platform, simple platform, little engine game, whatever you want to call it, in using just the drag and drop actions. There could well be a few little bugs and quirks with it and stuff. I haven't, you know, super thoroughly tested it or anything like that. And, you know, it's not, you know, my area of expertise. I don't use the drag and drop options a lot, but hopefully there I've been able to sort of show you kind of a bit more about how they work and how you can use them in a little bit more complicated ways, because they are still useful and they still, you know, do give you a lot of power and flexibility and all of that. And then when, you know, perhaps maybe later down the line you're ready to move on to, you know, learning some scripting and learning a little bit of code, you can look at my in-depth platformer tutorial, which shows you how to create basically everything we've created here, but step by step, explained line by line through the GML code. Entirely up to you now, the choice is there. So yeah, I hope you guys totally enjoyed that. I have a Facebook page now where you can keep up with the reasons why all my videos keep getting delayed, and all sorts of fun things like that, and any other fun, awesome things I happen to be doing or anything like that. You can follow it all on the Facebook page so that I don't have to blather on at the start of videos about stuff. I can blather on the Facebook page, and those that care can read it there. Awesome. Oh, just did another awesome rhyme. Awesome. Yep. So that's everything for this week. I hope you guys found that super useful, and I will catch you guys whenever I catch you guys. Probably next week. Yeah, I'm gonna say next week. See you guys next week. In a bit.